The following content contains personal experiences of our hosts and guests. We are not experts in this matter. We encourage challenging conversations with others and to achieve healing from our childhood. We hope to connect and allow a safe space to have an open discussion. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a qualified professional, diagnosis, or treatment. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of First Generation Podcast. Thank you for listening and subscribing to our podcast. Thank you for listening. I'm here. I'm one of your co-hosts, Tiffany, Kristie, and I am joined here by my lovely cousin, Nina Flores. So yeah, we're here to chat a little bit about our episode that you're going to listen in. I had the opportunity to connect with one of my long-term friends since grade school, since primary school, since elementary school, whatever you want to call it. Known him for over 30 years now and very close to him. And his name is Roland. And we talked a little bit about his journey and experience of becoming a doctor. So kind of just tying into our conversation last episode of shame. And yeah, I wanted to see how, you got to listen in to the episode. Wanted to get your quick thoughts. No spoilers.
Yeah. No. And I remember Dr. Roland from like your elementary school days when I used to come out here in the summer. So really glad that he's doing well. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there. But I mean, it's interesting just like his journey and just hearing kind of like similarities in how we were brought up, but also like some differences, right? Kind of talks about like, the career choices that his parents envisioned for him, which is very different from ours, which was like, you do have to become a doctor. Whereas, he chose that for himself. But I think just being first gen, and that combination, I'm really glad that he opened up and shared that experience. And so really like the biggest takeaway for me is, the prescription to happiness. You see what I did there, Dr.
Yes.
Is that there is really no like prescription to happiness for everyone. I mean, everyone's journey is different, but I think ultimately you have to be true to yourself and you have to accept yourself, and not everyone's going to accept who you are. And that's a journey also in just your relationships and friendships with people. So, super excited that he was on the show and shared his experience. And he was vulnerable, because I think a lot of us have kind of those struggles as well. And so it's just really great to talk about it, hear his experience, and heal from that as well. So.
Yes. And it was a nice like self-reflection because, before deciding who our next guest was, I did chat with him. He actually never really thought of his journey in this kind of aspect, that he actually started connecting some of the dots of like, oh, this is why I was like this or that, and yeah, very, very grateful that he was able to open up and share his story with us. And we're very excited for you to take a listen. Again, if you relate to any of this, the first generation feelings, please subscribe, like, rate, share our podcast with others. And also we are on Instagram. So give us a follow at first_gen_podcast. And for those watching, I'll put it here on the screen. But yeah, we're excited that you are all following us in this journey and exploration. So let's talk about it. Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's talk about it.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome back, everyone, to another awesome episode of First Generation Podcast. I'm one of the co-hosts, Tiffany, Kristie.
My cousin wasn't able to join us on this one. We are graced by one of my oldest friends, one of my day oneers
From first grade.
We've known each other quite some time now. Roland, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for joining
Mhm.
this pod, and opening up about your journey and experience.
Mhm.
We wanted to continue the topic of conversation on growing up with. I know we have similar backgrounds as first generation Filipino American
Mhm.
with our parents, and expectations, that they set forth on us at such a young age,
Mhm.
and wanted to talk more about like if there was shame and guilt in the occupational choice that you set
Mhm.
forth. But
Mhm.
just want to dive in a little bit more on your story, your
Yeah.
background, your family dynamic, because I
Mhm.
believe you are the youngest of three.
Mhm. Let's
Yeah.
get into it.
Let's get in it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
So, yeah, I mean, I know you guys were talking about shame a lot last week and just the inherent shame of just kind of even like everyday conversations you guys were talking about, just like talking about like, oh, I have a cold. And then, the parent just saying, well, it's because you didn't do this or it's
Yeah.
because you didn't do that. And yeah, I mean, I think part of being Filipino, part of being raised in like Filipino and Catholic households, there's so much guilt in everything. Um, but yeah, I mean, one of the things growing up, Filipino American, shame was kind of inherent in a lot of just, and it sounds bad. I feel like we're saying shame as if like we're being like whipped every day
Yeah,
of like,
like
shame
it's
on you for the,
torture. Yeah,
which
yeah.
is
But
not.
it's psychological.
But it's like psychological and a lot of this
mental,
stuff. Yeah.
emotional.
So yeah, I mean, again, you guys had mentioned as well, kind of being expected to have followed a certain profession. The majority, I mean, you go to any hospital here in LA and every nurse is Filipino. You know what I mean?
You'll know a Filipino.
Yeah,
You step in.
There was, I think someone said on like the Emmys or something, they were like, why aren't there any like Filipino nurses being nominated for Emmys for like Grey's Anatomy or something?
Yeah.
Because they just realized no one was recognizing how many Filipinos are in the hospital. Anyway, I'm a doctor, so that's why
Yes.
we talked about this. But yeah, I mean, we were having a conversation earlier if there was ever any expectations set for me of wanting to go into medicine. And I don't think I ever grew up with my parents saying like, you should be a doctor.
Oh,
I specifically
that's a
remember,
blessing.
I know, right? I specifically remember, I think I was like in first or second grade or something like that. And I think that there was someone on TV and they were an artist. Like it was like the prototypical artist, like they're holding a palette at an easel. And I remember saying something to the effect to my mom of like, I want to be that when I grow up.
Yeah.
And her being very explicit in being like, you are, I'm looking at the camera now. It's like, you're not going to make money doing that. So you're not going to have that as a profession. And I was like, oh, okay. It's like those like inherent things where like that's not going to be viable for you when you grow up.
It's because it's money.
Because it's and that's the thing. Yeah, it's like you need to provide for your family.
Yep.
Like it's how the means to being able to provide for people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't pursue what you naturally love and want to do, but do what will provide for you. Yeah. Which, like, now as an adult, I realize, like, yes, it is nice to have money that can provide me to do certain things. And if maybe I was in a job that didn't allow that, it would be harder. But it's also like, what are the things that I missed out on during the time that I was training in medical school and stuff like that? So that being said, there was never an inherent kind of push for them to say, like, you must become a doctor. But I think there was never really an option for me to not. I don't think they ever had like expectations for me to not do what I wanted to do. Growing up, so the way I grew up, my dad kind of ran our family business in the Philippines, so he was going back and forth. And I don't even know if you knew that, but
I knew he traveled a lot, but I didn't know.
He was so like, I always say this is growing up. I don't think I knew my dad for more than like a consecutive 5 months.
Oh wow!
Ever. So, and again, having listened to the podcast with you and Nina, I know there was kind of like a lot of talking about like, Filipino moms. So this is episode for daddy issues.
Hey, daddy.
But yeah, so there was that growing up. So that being said, my mom was a lot more involved in kind of, I don't want to say my upbringing, but yeah. And because of that,
Raising you, yeah. She's the present parent.
Exactly. She was the present parent. She was the one who was kind of pushing me, and she really did push me academically. And I think because of that, I kind of just was naturally like, okay, I've always wanted to be a doctor. And so, yeah, so high school, I knew I wanted to do it. I remember doing like my senior project on like shadowing a doctor, went to college, like realizing I wanted to be a doctor, went to grad school, ended up going to med school as well. And the thing about all that, realizing is that I left. Like when I left after high school, I moved to DC. I moved to the East Coast. I didn't come back until this past year. I mean, obviously, you know that.
I haven't seen you,
but
in forever. But we still stay connected. Which
exactly.
Is
I mean, again, the whole like since first grade thing, you know, we're able to hold on to that. But and it's also funny because like another topic, but like having those close relationships, a lot of people. They're like, oh, you're still friends with your friends from elementary school, and part of me is like, are you not?
Yeah,
like, do
I know.
You not have that group?
Are you judging me right now?
Yeah, because that's kind of
shouldn't you have those friends?
Yeah, right. And I mean, I do wonder to some extent if it is. Yeah, I mean, we all grew up in a first generation household. Like there was a different bond that we all had there.
Yeah.
So yeah, but anyway, yeah, I went to med school, did residency, and I am now a doctor. So. All that being said, it was great, right? It was the fulfilling the first generation child dream, the prototype, the template that every immigrant parent wants, right? Like you either become a doctor or a lawyer. Like that's it. Those are like the two.
Those are the two golden
that you do, right?
Career paths. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, again, it was one of those things where my parents ostensibly, I think, were proud of me. I think another part that is very interesting about the shame conversation and where that comes in with, I think, immigrant parents is while shame is like a big part of disciplining, I think pride is another part of it, of like maintaining their own pride and how prideful they are. But interestingly enough, as much as they're talking about having to be prideful, they never say like they're proud of you.
No. You know? They say it to someone else.
Exactly.
Not directly to you.
And it's not even like, oh, I'm so proud of them. It's like, oh, look, they're a doctor. Oh, look, they're this.
Right.
And so
it's like we're a prized possession. Like, hey, look at my shiny.
Yes, exactly.
Child.
It's interesting because there's the idea of shame, the idea of pride, and yet, and again, I feel like in these kind of conversations, right? I feel like it's one of those things where people are like, oh, these are just like millennials whining about their upbringing. But, it's like, it's one of those things. And now I'm going to walk out of here being like, oh, look at him with his like daddy issues and parent issues. But again, that's that's the reality.
It's reality in your experience
of what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever heard my parents say the words like, I'm proud of you.
Yep.
I don't think that was ever verbalized. And so those actions of not seeing it directed toward us, maybe towards their friends or towards their siblings, it's not something we see, So not that was any type of driver. I think by the time I had already finished residency, I was already a doctor. I was kind of independent from that. I think that was what was great about being able to leave the house, I think is like
be away from them.
Yeah, I'm just doing what I want. Like I've chosen this path. I'm not really doing this because you wanted me to do this. So I don't think that there was, well, I don't know, maybe there was, maybe subliminally there was me kind of fulfilling that and wanting them to say that they're proud of me. I mean, it would be nice to hear that, like,
I mean,
as a
for
kid,
any kid,
you always want to hear your parents say like you're proud of them, you know? But I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing is, again, they had never told me they wanted to be a doctor or forced me into it. Once I did it, I knew they were proud and I knew they were like, okay, and now that I'm a doctor and I'm practicing here in LA and I've moved here.
You came back home.
I came back home. That's the other big part of it. So yeah, I mean, all things considered, I checked all the boxes of fulfilling that template for an immigrant parent. And then
but
I told them, hey, I'm gay.
Yeah. It's out. You out. Yeah.
Like throw that checklist away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't care that you've worked 12, 15 years to, work your ass off for this profession. You're not going to get married and you're not going to have kids and you're not going to have all of this happen within the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
All that shit
All's gone.
So it was weird. Again, it was at that point, and I'm realizing It's interesting. I think having thought about this, one of the things that I had told you is I almost think like subliminally maybe in me working towards becoming a doctor, like, going to school, being so busy and just like burying my head in the books. I almost did. I had a social life. I had friends, but I didn't date.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't date anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't out at all during that time. And so I almost wonder if like subliminally that was my way of just not acknowledging.
Like you were covering up or pushing it aside, just like, okay,
it's
you
there.
You didn't want it.
I'm not
it's like you didn't want to face it.
Yes, I'm not going to face it.
You don't want
Yes,
to face
exactly.
it. Yeah.
And what's my reason? I mean, I have a reason. I need to study.
Yeah.
I need to pass this test. I need to become a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I almost think like subliminally, I've never thought about this before, but I think subliminally maybe there was that aspect of me not accepting my homosexuality because it was easy to, because I didn't have to face it.
Yeah.
Whenever I met or whenever I was with, family or aunts and uncles, like, oh, girlfriend, I was like, I'm gonna become a doctor, and they'll be like, oh my God, let's talk about that instead. So I can kind of easily skirt that issue.
Yeah.
And then once I got to residency, I had already, I'm essentially a doctor. I'm still training. I'm kind of more free to, live my life. And I think that's kind of where I felt that natural time was easier to come out, to date.
Yeah.
Because that was just kind of an empty part. That part was not happening, and I think because I could make the excuse that so much other stuff was going on. And so I think, and my parents had never acknowledged it either. They never said, like, they never pressured me in the same way of like, oh, are you, I know it varies specifically for like, for men and women. There's so much more of like when are you going to get married? When are you going to have a kid?
Yeah.
Whereas I didn't have that. I think my mom was more like, okay, well, we know you're working toward a goal, so just work toward it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
like, nothing should get in your way of becoming
achieving that. Yeah, exactly.
Your doctor.
Yeah. And so then when I came out, that was just kind of a whole nother layer of navigating my family relationships, navigating that, and also kind of realizing, how much was I going to involve my family in my life based on how they were able to accept it?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And how'd they take that when you first came out? Like, what was the reactions?
It was interesting. I think if you talk to any person who's had to come out to their family, everyone has different experiences, but across the board, I think there's always a lot of experiences where it's not necessarily taken as, okay, someone is giving me news about themselves. It's more, how am I relating to this news and how does it affect me? And what did I do? And I think that is what a lot of parents, I think I can say this safely, a lot of parents of gay people, their first reaction is, what did I do wrong? Because it is perceived in that way. Granted, yes, it's 2024.
Yep.
It's so much more accepted by many parents across the board. But for Filipino parents, like, there is just something inherently wrong with you if you are gay. I think we can say that's a generalization that a lot of Filipinos and even Filipino American parents can think, and a lot of people can think that way. But I think specifically Catholic Filipinos.
Because of the religion. It's like, I can't see my child now get married in the church and like all these barriers that, that they had in their mind. It's like, this was what I wanted for my child. And now it's not going to happen because of their sexual orientation.
Yeah. And I mean, I think for them, they think like their choice, like that it's their choice to be.
Right. It's like, what, for them, it's the reflection on what they are. They're like, oh, if like their friends or other family members now start talking, it's on them. It's like, what did you do to your child? And it is sad that that's the first thing that comes to their mind. Not like, I'm going to be here for you, my child, anak. I'm going to be here for you. That's such a big thing to express. To breaking that news, and you're terrified because like it took a long time for you to actually come out, and it's a lot. It's a lot for them to take in, and that could be a traumatizing experience for the individual that's saying that news to their parents, you know. But yeah, it is 2024, and it is nice that things are more progressive, but who knows? There's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I'm lucky enough. So in terms of kind of to your question of like, how was that received? My brother and my sister, you know, are great. I mean, again, you know, they are living in today's day and age. So I think the way that they took their news, I think was kind of different in not really ways that had to do with cultural ways, but more just kind of personal ways of my closeness with them. For my parents, more, it was actually interesting. My mom, she cried, which then like made me cry. And I'm like, oh shit, why the fuck am I crying over this? You know what I mean? Like, I'm literally just telling her what I am.
Yeah.
But then you're kind of realizing, and again, you know, there's part of me that wants to go back to that. It's 2024. I mean, this time it's 2020, but like or 2017. But I'm like, come on, you know what I mean? Like just be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's one of the things that we have to do as first generation Filipino Americans, but as first generation Americans for our parents, is make excuses for them.
Yeah.
Excuse them for things, excuse them for some of these like behaviors.
And it shouldn't be on you.
We like shouldn't have to do that.
No.
You know?
Yeah.
But I think that was kind of learned in that conversation with me. I in the same way that, you know, I was telling her this piece of who I am, I had to give her the room to deal with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, the room to deal with that I mean, again, yeah, it was kind of hurtful, you know, were the words like disappointment thrown in there? Yeah. Was the terms or things like, I never would have thought this for you. Again, it kind of sounds like I told them that, I don't even know. Like, it was almost literally like tell them I was dying or something, or I have cancer or something like that. It's because they were like, oh my God, I would never have wanted this for you. Like, you know, like that it was like some crazy news that was like life altering.
And it was like their choice to put that on.
Exactly.
It's like,
you know,
no.
Yeah, no.
You're an individual. This is your this is your story. You know, and you're sharing it with me.
And I'm kind of like giving you a heads up, like this is where I am in life, you know? So that was interesting to kind of hear that. And you know, now where we're at, my mom is great. I'm happily married to a white man. That's a whole nother topic in itself. But
we'll come back to that.
But my mom is great. You know what I mean? She, you know, it's gotten to the point where she's even calling him now more than she's calling me, which is for me. So that's great. But then when he gets on the phone with her, I'm like, good luck, homie.
Yeah.
You can deal with that. So that's nice. My dad was a little bit of a different story, interestingly enough. And that was kind of the barrier. I had to have other family present because I didn't know how he was going to react. You know, I don't know. I think the Filipino,
you weren't very close growing up anyway, and then to break that
news. Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I wasn't really close with him, and I didn't know how he would take it. I mean, I actually remember the day I came out to him. I asked my brother to be present. I had already told my brother. He was kind of fully aware, and I asked my brother to be there. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, and maybe it is dramatic because my reference point is just like Filipino movies and how they're almost like telenovelas. You know what I mean? Like the
dramatic, dramatic.
But I didn't know what my dad's reaction would be.
Yeah,
I didn't know if he was gonna lunge across the table. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's so terrifying. Unpredictable. You know. Luckily, I was not hit. But it was interesting. My dad had even said, you know, when you told me you wanted to talk to me about something, I knew this is what you were going to tell me. So I was like, oh, okay.
And your mom hasn't.
And my mom didn't say that. And I'm like, you look at pictures of me when I was a kid and you watch videos and you're going to tell me you didn't think I was gay back then. I'm like, okay, you had me dancing to Natalie Cole in the living room. I was gay as fuck. But he said that, and that was a very interesting response. I don't know if I'd ever told you my story. Yeah, coming out to my dad.
This is again first news right here.
He told, so he kind of opened with that.
How did that sounded? Surprising, but did you feel like, okay, he kind of knew, and was that reassuring, you think?
In some, you know, now thinking about it, I realized verbalizing it now, I realize that should have been reassuring. Like that should have been like, oh wow, this takes a lot off my shoulder.
Yeah.
I think during in the moment, there was just still so much tension that I didn't really know if
How
that
to
was going to feel better. The next follow-up question was even funnier because he was like, so, I don't know, I actually told him, I told him I'm currently in a relationship with someone. And he said, so are they white? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, okay.
What?
I was like, oh.
What?
Okay. I don't know what that's
Sigh
fraught
of relief
with.
there.
Yeah, right? Like, I don't know what direction that could have gone in. But again, that was, another thing that I realize now, like, probably should have reassured me. But then again, it's like, with parents, they'll build you up to a certain thing, and then they'll just make a statement that will just negate everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you're like, what? Like,
wait.
You're like shocked with the reaction.
Yes.
Like, we've over anticipated their reaction.
Yes.
And then it's like anticlimactic.
Yes. So
like,
he had said that, and then he was like, well, there's nothing I can change about you now, or something like that. Where it was like, I guess I can't change anything. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, again, it was better than I overall had expected. And then, the next day there was another interesting kind of, so I think my dad had taken that day to kind of process everything. Yeah. And again, it's just so interesting. It goes back to, what you and Nina were talking about the shame is like not being able to communicate feelings. There's almost like there's a stigma against that, like, openness of feelings, right? Because I soon learned from my sister that after I had that conversation with my dad, I went about my business. I think I
brushed it.
Like, we were like, okay, let's have dinner now. And then everything,
it's like, it's normal. Was fine. It's fine.
I went to sleep in my childhood room because I was visiting home. So I went to sleep in my room. And, come to find out, my dad has this like huge conversation with my sister and my mom that night, just talking about like everything.
Oh, wow.
And I think there were maybe tears. But like, again, just like it was that conversation of like, what did I do wrong? Like, what did I do wrong to lead to him being gay? Like, what do we do? Like, do we not like play sports with him enough? Like, do we not like show like wrestling matches? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They start to, and that's exactly what they did. I think at that point, my mom had already kind of processed her own way. But again, my dad had never communicated any of that to me.
You.
So my sister, and I find out about this later on from my sister, but another, the next day, my dad, my flight, I was flying out the next day, and he was like, okay, I just wanted to talk to you again. I was like, okay, I don't know where this is going. It's kind of weird. Like the fact that like a Filipino dad is like, I want to talk to you. I'm like, well, this is weird. When have you ever initiated conversation? You know what I mean? Like, and he said, I just want you to be safe. And I was like, okay. And he was like, I just don't want you to get sick. And I'm like, what the fuck does this mean?
Yeah.
So then he's like, just don't get sick. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, I'm trying to think through this. And I think like, again, I think it's this, and again, I don't want, I go to saying Filipino because that's what my parents are, but I think you just go to this old school mentality of what being gay is, that I'm like going out to bars and, hooking up with guys all over the place. Yeah. And I think like he was straight up being like, don't fucking get HIV.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember, just being, I got angry when I realized that. I'm like, why are you saying that? I told you I'm in a relationship, and I specifically remember this. I'm like, we're normal people. We eat pizza. Like eating pizza is a way to say like we're not unsafe.
But it's the reality of it, and like you said, the old generation. It's like if they watch the news and that stuff just kept feeding them that type of information, it's gonna stick, and that's the first thing they're gonna, come to mind because they didn't expect this, and yeah, being here in the 80s and whatnot, like all that stuff was just like, oh no, is this going to happen to my child? Not realizing the words he said.
He was saying, yeah. It was, so that was interesting. And so I think now where we've come to a relationship, my dad is, I think, and especially now that we've moved back, think both my parents are they're in a place where I give them the grace to like live with, when I say this, like live with it makes it sound like it is bad, like of me being gay. But I think I've seen that they've kind of accepted it as, it seems as if they've accepted it just like my brother and his wife or my sister and her husband. We went out to dinner with them last week and, we were like doing hot pot. My dad was giving Dylan meat, I mean, he's like, he was showing those like
Those
typical
same
parent
loving...
ways. Yeah. Like I'm not saying admission, but it's like, oh, I know you like Dr. Pepper, so now our fridge is full of Dr. Pepper whenever we go visit.
Okay.
So it's like those kind of things. So I give them a lot of credit. I think that they have made huge steps in where they were from where they were before. But yeah, I think there's going to be, I think with every kid and their parent, there's you kind of excuse them for certain behaviors and you kind of wish they didn't act that way. But I give them credit for it. It's been a long journey, and I think we've worked on a lot of stuff. I feel like with my parents, and they've done a lot of work. I don't know how they have done their work. I don't know if they reflect on it on their own or this is just an internal dialogue for them. But yeah, I think things are good now. But yeah, it was just it was a hard time. I think the whole idea of like shame, like there was a part of it where I'm like, I did everything you wanted me to do. I became a doctor, but then now you can't even acknowledge the person I love. You know what I mean? That
or the person I am.
I am. Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. It's not even like the person I'm with. You're right.
Yeah,
it's who your own child is.
It's your own child.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's tough. That's rough. But it's beautiful to hear the journey and the growth that your parents have now, are currently at and will continue to hopefully, I don't want to say be better, but like to continue, to continue.
Yeah.
And it's great. And we love that you're back here. So
yeah,
we missed you.
I literally had, so the timing was I came out to my family. I came out to my dad. It was my second year of residency. I came back from coming out to my dad and I had a stroke a week later. So I think
timeline, timeline now that you're looking back at it.
Yeah. It's like shit. You're like high stress environment. My body was
not.
It was my body is a temple and it was crumbling at that time.
That's going to be the social bite right there.
Because I mean, even after that, so I mean, I totally didn't even bring this part up, but I had a stroke.
Yep.
My parents came to visit, and then basically 2 weeks after coming out to my dad, he was then meeting my future husband. He like came and this was like a kind of a, I can't believe I didn't tell. I mean, we haven't like talked about a lot of this, but like my parents came out when I had the stroke.
Yeah.
And we were in my apartment. My parents were staying in my apartment, and Dylan, again, I married him because he's dedicated to me. And I don't know if you remember in our wedding, our officiants had included something where I had like told him, I was like, I had married you when I woke up in the stroke unit and you were next to me, because he was there from like right when it happened. And I remember he was staying in my apartment. And again, it goes back to me trying to channel what my dad is thinking and thinking through his mindset, because my mom had told me, like, my dad had said like, oh, why is he staying here with him? And my mom straight up was like, we came here a week later. He has been with him the entire time. You should be happy that someone is here for him, and you should be happy that he's here for him.
Yes, mama.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
Preach.
Yes.
But yeah, so that was just a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. That's a lot to
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was right then.
So, coming out and seeing my parents' reaction to it, or really kind of in what I perceived initially as a rejection, makes me kind of like ashamed to be Filipino, because I'm like, God, how can I am from a culture that is not as accepting of who I am, which is funny because then you go to the Philippines and like they have amazing drag queens that are like putting on the best shows. You know what I mean? But I think that's the funny part of it. You know what I mean? I think for Filipinos, they're like, wow, this is so great when it's all fun and games.
Yeah.
But when it's
For
your own kid
entertainment.
doing
Yeah.
it, no.
For entertainment.
We cannot allow that.
Mm-mm.
So the reason I say is, Dylan, my husband, was like, oh, I want to go to the Philippines. And like in the beginning, I was like, no, we're not going to go. I just don't want to go. And I think part of that was coming to terms with the fact that I was so rejecting of visiting the Philippines, because I think for me, the Philippines was still family, and when I go to the Philippines, yes, I would love to take Dylan to see the house that my dad grew up in, to see the business they had. But then I would have to face family who would then, and again, it's weird because then it turns me back into like me having to be ashamed of who I am or have to hide that part of me when I don't want to be that way. And so there was a part of me was like, I don't want him to, I want to protect him from that. I don't want him to see that side of my family or that side of rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And another one of like the still kind of interesting parts of it is just kind of like the verbiage, like just the term bakla.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if anyone says that, I still kind of have like an internal like shuddering feeling because it was such a pejorative term growing up. You know what I mean? It was not something you should do. When talking about like, oh, like they're bakla, you know what I mean? Like that was such a negative thing to be
say,
to say. So, in jest, Dylan, my husband, knows the term bakla and he'll kind of say it, but I almost want to be like, that is a very heavy term for me, to say, like, because then in some ways I realize like, yes, I guess when it comes down to it, like I am bakla. Literally, me saying that right now is like very like, ooh, you know what I mean? Like the inner child in me is like quaking because it's like, oh my god, like that's something that was just so negative when you grew up. So to that word is still like a very heavily fraught word. So yeah, I mean, I think again, just like culturally, it's a weird thing. But we deal with it,
right? And I think also, just hearing that, it's like maybe you don't want him to feel uncomfortable there too, and protect him from that. And just go to the nice islands. Don't visit.
I mean, that's the thing. I'm like, let's just go to the beaches. I'm just gonna skip the family thing for now.
See ya.
But yeah, there's that weird like cultural part of it too.
Again, a lot of progress that the world needs to get through, but I'm glad we're living in this generation that there's making some
1000%
some moves, some
Yeah.
movement. And I just want to say congrats to you and your husband for celebrating a 1-year anniversary, wedding anniversary.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
It's a big milestone. We celebrated with sushi. It was not a big celebration at all.
The best. But seriously, thank you for sharing that. I know that could probably not be an easy thing to get off your chest and express to our listeners, watchers. But it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
beautiful thing.
You're
doing it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's it's like it's life. I think as again like being first generation children. Like I said, I keep going back to like this idea of like making excuses for them. And I think anyone who's a kid as an adult child of a parent, you like start to see yourself becoming more of the adult. And you're like, wait, like now that I'm an adult and I'm adulting and like you're an adult, why are you thinking, you know what I mean? Like,
why are you still in that mindset?
Like, why can't you grow?
Yeah. Why can't you progress? Why can't you evolve? No, why can't, like be with the times, things have been changing and I feel like for the better. And they're stuck in their old ways and that's on them. And they need to break that cycle. And I think a lot of us now are these cycle breakers and recognizing the stuff that our parents have brought past from their parents and be like, I don't want to do this.
No.
I don't do this for me or for my child.
Or for my kid,
So I'm just like, it's time to change the narrative here.
Yeah. And I think I think a lot of what I've, since having moved back home now, I'm so much, geographically closer to my parents. I think when I first moved here, I'm like, I would tell Dylan, who is my husband, I was just like, oh my God, my parents doing this, my parents doing that. And he was kind of like, just like chill, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was, I don't know, like I don't know. I mean, for
culturally,
a cultural thing, American thing to kind of have a relatively like separate existence from your parents, or to be able to kind of like just kind of be like, okay, your parents are their own people and they're their own people. Whereas I think when I moved here, I got so frustrated with how my parents were doing certain things, and I kind of took it upon myself to get like stressed out about it. And then I think part of it was just like, you just kind of accept it. You know what I mean? I'm like, this is how they are. This is how they're going to be. Yeah. And I think the only way we can act on it is exactly what you said, is just like breaking the cycle and making sure to not further propagate these habits for future generations.
Right.
You know?
Right. And hopefully, my wishful thinking is like they learn from our actions and reactions, that they're like, oh, okay, there's a different way, because if I feel like we sometimes make these excuses, we tend to accept these views, and sometimes they're like, oh, they think it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep acting like this. But like, there's going to be this fine line and fine dance where we're like, no, you crossed the line here. I'm going to
stand my ground.
I'm going to say something. Versus like, or pick our battles, But at the end of the day, I think we're all getting more cognizant of, that's not okay. Let me see how I can reframe it for them or help them get there. Cause it's tough. They're stuck in the old ways. And sometimes they can't
budge.
You can't budge.
Yeah.
And
you try your best.
And it feels like, you're just talking to a wall at that point. But just don't give up on yourself.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your story.
Yeah. Thank you for listening and providing an outlet for it. I mean, I think just, like you guys said, it's important for the stories to be shared. And it's an interesting story. It's what happened, but it's life.
It's you. It's you, and that's it. And and be proud of it. I respect and very thankful that you are being vulnerable and sharing your story. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. No biggie. Yeah. And for listeners, please give us a like, give us 5 stars, give us a listen, share with anyone else that might, connect with this particular episode or any of our episodes. And we'll talk more next time. Thanks for listening. And we're hoping to grow and heal some more.